Okay, call the meeting to order. Entertain a motion to go into closed session for the following reasons: to discuss personnel matters, to consider the acquisition of real property for public purpose. Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we go into closed session to discuss personnel matters and consider the acquisition of real property for public purpose.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're now in closed session. Okay, call the meeting to order. Now in open session, special meeting, 3.1, Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and I'll lead that. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. 3.2, approval of today's agenda. I'll entertain a motion for that.
Make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, agenda's approved. 4.1 is consent items, but it's only one: personnel matters. Approval of open certificated personnel matters. So we can entertain a motion if people are comfortable to approve consent items. It's just that one.
Make a motion to approve consent item.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's carried. Okay, 5.1, action items. Approve virtual plan. Upon the recommendation of the superintendent, is there a motion to approve the virtual plan?
I make a motion to approve the virtual plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll go to Dr. Briggs for any explanation, discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. The Comprehensive Prolonged State of Emergency Plan in accordance with Senate Bill 610 and the Annotated Code of Maryland. This plan addresses situations wherein the governor declares a state of emergency, preventing regular in-person attendance at public schools for at least 14 consecutive school days. It's designed to be adaptable to fit the specific needs of the affected schools and the particular circumstances of the emergency. The plan was shared with the board in the weekend's update.
And maybe it doesn't need to be said, but just to be clear, if with the public doing this, we're not approving going into virtual school again.
Correct.
Because I don't want any misunderstanding. It's
That is correct. There is no intent to ever use this plan. However, we're submitting.
I know what we lived through, and I just don't want that to be the perception. Thank you, Dr. Briggs.
State requirement.
State requirement. Okay, so unless there's other questions or comments, I assume you're ready to vote on approving motion to approve the virtual plan, and I'll do roll call. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Ms. Hazel.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Mrs. Beecham.
Aye.
Mr. Plotz.
Aye.
Dr. Ennis.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. It's approved. 5.2, upon recommendation of the superintendent, is there a motion to determine that approximately 19.77 acres of board property, parcels 243, 102, and 383 on tax map 29, grid 20, located on the west side of Jersey Road, is no longer needed for school purposes and shall be transferred to the county government, subject to review and approval by the state superintendent and the Interagency Commission on School Construction, the IAC, in accordance with Comar 14.39.02.21-25 and compliance with the provisions of Section 4-115 of the Education Article. Is there a motion to that effect? The combined value is $99,000.
I make a motion to approve the property acquisition.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we go to Dr. Rager.
Good morning. In 2020, the County Executive's Office approached WCPS for consideration regarding approximately 3.3 acres of an existing 14.3 acre parcel along Jersey Road as surplus property, which the board approved and IAC acknowledged. Since then, based upon further interest in this property and with the board's approval today, these three parcels will be declared surplus property and resubmitted to the Interagency Commission on School Construction for state superintendent consideration, and then on to county government for consideration of additional support as originally proposed back in 2020, or an alternative funding avenue to the board.
Anyone have any questions? I think we've discussed this previously, right? Yep.
Several times.
Okay, I assume you're ready to vote then. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Ms. Hazel?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Beecham?
Aye.
Mr. Platts?
Aye.
Dr. Ennis?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so it's carried. So with no other business to be brought before the open session, can we move directly to the work session? Okay.
Mr. Malone?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Swaggin is up. Would you like us to switch to that or keep recording with Mr. Butler?
Probably got to go to swag it, right?
What's the chances of them going down again? Is it-
They're running from an alternate site, I believe.
Okay,
So it could go down. Paul will be already.
okay.
Probably best to go to swag it.
How
and
long
then-
does it take?
Yeah, that's a
5
good
minutes?
question
They're,
too.
they're up and running. I see the display is up, so we could just switch the sound on and you'll be live.
Okay, let's do that. Then Mr. Butler doesn't have to continue. You still
He's having a
recording?
big time over there.
He's still recording.
He's pretty steady.
I know, right?
Does
You
it?
can
Announce
just
you're going
stand.
into. If you're going to.
Okay. So we're now moving into work session. 6.1 Student Discipline Review. And I do believe I turn that over to Mrs. Miles.
Good morning, everyone. Chair Malone, Vice Chair Brown, Dr. Stauffer, board members. It is quite a pleasure and opportunity to be before you today with our end of year, or close to end of year, student discipline and school safety update. We'll be pulling the display, the PowerPoint up there for you so that you can follow along with us. We do have, as that's coming up, we do have 2 topics on the agenda for this part of the work session. The discipline data review, you'll be very familiar with that, trying to keep the format very similar to past data reviews for a measure of consistency and so that you can see trends or breaks in trend. And also an update on interventions and supports. And now we're all caught up. For the discipline data review, very similar, but I will point out a difference here. We're going to review the current year-to-date data in comparison with the same time period for 22-23, looking at referrals, suspension, days of suspension, referral codes, data specific to the attack on adult, attack on student, and fighting. Those are the 400 levels. We've done that each time we've come together. Review the data disaggregated by grade level, and there is a focus on primary grade. Excuse me, that focus is specific to questions and requests for information in relation to some of the trends that have been observed over the time, and then a review of disaggregated data by special education status. So, told you what we'll do, and now we'll do it. Looking at the conduct report, this is very familiar to you, as in the past. We'll look at the referrals first. Please note the date at the top. This was completed with data through March the 12th. It's actually completed the week following, but the report is a week in lag. So an additional update for data through the actual last day of school will be provided to you in a weekly update from Dr. Stauffer moving forward. Looking at this, you can see the total referrals. There has been a decrease. And then you can look at the disaggregation by elementary, by middle, and by high. We see the greatest decrease in middle school. We can make reference here to the addition of the no fee for the clubs, the activities. We know that that engagement has had great dividends for students, as well as the RTE program, and we will continue to duplicate those and to grow those. A slight increase in the elementary, and we've talked about that throughout the quarterly updates, and there is just a slight increase in the high school as well. Remember, these are referrals. If we look at our next information points. We're looking at actual suspensions. Hopefully not ever the majority of referrals would result in suspension. You can see on total suspensions a slight decrease. That's across all grades, pre-K through 12. Slight uptick in elementary, measurable decrease in middle, as well as an increase in high school. I'm going to go back to a point in time, I believe specific to our most recent data review, where the question came up about the increase in high school suspensions. And we attribute that in many cases to a response to severity of behavior. There may not be as many of the behaviors, but when they occur with all of the interventions and things that have been in place, the response may be more specific in the suspension because of the additional steps that have already been taken. I'll pause there for a moment for any questions or comments or concerns. And as you know, you don't have to wait for me to pause. You jump in there at any point in time. Then we'll move forward. Those suspensions transition or transfer or translate into the actual suspension days or total count of days suspended. For an overall, there is a slight increase. Elementary, an increase in total days. Middle school, a decrease. And again, in alignment with those numbers of suspensions, the high school total days have seen an increase. As you can see in all of these charts, and I apologize for not mentioning this sooner, just so used to you being used to the charts as well, this data is all disaggregated by race, by Black, white, Hispanic, multi or 2+, and other. These are the races identified for the students at the time of enrollment.
Has any of these increases in suspension in the high school, has that caused anybody to not get their required 180 days needed for
Well,
graduation?
individually, if a student is suspended, obviously they are marked absent. A suspension is an excused absent. If it, during the time of suspension, students are permitted to access all of their work, and there is no loss of academic credit. It's up to them to do the work. If there is an extended suspension, anything beyond 10 days, or if there's an expulsion, which is anything beyond 44 days, there is a provision of support, most specifically for anything beyond the 44 days, a provision of support through our offices on a weekly basis that includes ongoing communication with the school, between the school and the family, as well as direct support, whether it's through Edmentum or a teacher working virtually or in person with the student for a specific number of hours per week.
So do we have anybody that falls within that category right now?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We have a small number of students who are receiving those services based on extended suspension or expulsion. Yes, sir. Those are assignments that are not made by the school administration or the school principal. Those are requests from the school to my office, and I work with the team. Not to leave Dr. Jones out, but they don't usually come in for elementary, so Mr. Brady, Mrs. Morris Springston, and I, and if there is a special ed situation involvement, then Mr. Smith, we meet with the parent, or guardian, the student, and make decisions from that point forward. So we actually duplicate the due process before making an assignment of that type. Then if you look at the referrals by reason, very interesting. I want you to know that I did not take the easy way out and just duplicate the verbiage in there just to not have to retype. This is the actual accounting for the referrals. The top 6 reasons are the same as they were a year ago at the time of this data. Disruption followed by class cutting, disrespect, attack on student, fighting, inappropriate use of personal electronics. Little reminder there, you don't see tardiness. You're going to see some data on that later, but I do not include those in these totals. That is the one category that is pulled out because it was skewing the data in a way that I wanted it to be more specific for you. But I have done that consistently throughout the year.
I'm assuming that the electronic hall pass for the middle schools has been helpful. Do we have numbers to know if that's, okay.
You looked ahead on my PowerPoint,
No, I didn't,
Ms.
I
Hazel.
promise.
It would be okay if you did. Excellent segue, thank you. You're kind of setting me up for that, so I appreciate it. Yes, middle and high school, you will see data on that.
Is that
Just a
considered
moment.
class cutting? What would that even be considered if they were wandering the halls when they're not?
Class
Because that's class,
Mhm.
okay.
Yes. And remember, we did not implement e-hall pass or electronic hall pass in middle school until just about the beginning of second
Yeah.
semester. So we have a variance from the first half of the year to the second half. Okay. This is the same breakdown that you have seen in past presentations. We started the year looking at those attack on adult, attack on student, and fighting. We call those 400 level offenses. Same format with a comparison from last year to date, this year to date. And the top number is the total. The bottom number with the dashes represents the total for elementary, middle, and high. And I've double checked my math. Hopefully I haven't messed up, and the dashes should add up to the top number each time. You will see the attack on adult elementary is higher and assumes or consumes the greater percentage of that number. I'll have some disaggregated data for you in just a few moments on that. The attack on student, there was an increase in the elementary with decrease in middle and in high. And the fighting, there is a trend there with increase in elementary and decrease in middle and high.
These attacks on adults, I'm assuming a lot of these are attacks on teachers. How are the teachers taking this? I mean, these ones that are attacked, what's happening to them? Are they still here, or are they, I mean, what happens with them?
Whenever there's a situation like that, Mr. Palmer, and thank you for the question, there's always follow-up from the school administration, an offer of the appropriate support. Sometimes those are in-house, sometimes the staff member may choose to go an avenue outside of the school. There's always follow-up. I know that there are times, many times, when it would be Mrs. Morris Springston or Dr. Jones, Mr. Brady, Mr. Smith, any of us that would be in touch with the school to check on the teacher. Please keep in mind, and what I'm about to say in no way minimizes this in any way. It is completely unacceptable to have behavior that would be classified such as this. And we're doing a lot of things to make those occurrences much less frequent. But some of these, and we continue to work with administration, some of these, when you look at the definition, it's very important, and as you know, we drill down to the level of the actual referral, the language that comes from the staff member. And some of these may not be something that results in an actual physical injury, but the behavior itself presented itself with an intention, or the student presented the behavior with an intention of an attack. So, again, not to minimize, but to give you a real example, throwing the dry erase markers and the erasers and the box that was on the table at the front of the room toward the teacher, saying, "Get out of my way," or "I want to hit you," that may have, in that instance, been classified as an attack on an adult without an actual injury, thank goodness, to the staff member. So there is a variance in there. But again, any behavior that is intended to attack another person or to engage in a fight with another person, our schools are not the places for those behaviors. So we continue to work with the individual students to make those changes.
Miles,
Yes, ma'am.
to better understand the 401 data
Yes, ma'am.
specifically, could you provide, and I realize you can't do it now,
Mhm.
could you provide the number of different students that make up that data, that 156, that 67, that 20? I'm assuming I'm not talking about 156 students, different students. So how many different students are we talking about in this data?
We do have that data, and I'll be glad to share that with you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I may have some of that for you in a slide that's upcoming,
Okay.
as you see that, and then I can go back and get additional data beyond that.
I said maybe with the holiday weekend.
Excellent questions, and I appreciate your thought and your willingness to put those questions and challenges forward because you are looking at this data as we are. These are real people, real children with real instances in real schools in Wicomico County. These are not just numbers. All right. This is where you may get some of that data that you were just asking about. So let me explain how this table is organized. You can see the headers across the top. This is only specific to the 400 level data, with again the comparison across the 2 years and that final column of change factor. This has been broken down into elementary, middle, and high. And you can look at, in pre-K through 5, again our elementary band, the number of referrals, 1,238, made up by the number of distinct students being 755. Following that table across to the right, an increase in referrals of 26%, again this is pre-K through 5, an increase of the total number of distinct students being 12%. I think that's along the lines, Dr. Ennis, of what you were asking, but certainly can provide additional data as needed.
Yeah, I'd like the more specifics for the 400 level ones, just
This
as
is
to-
400s. This is solely
as to
400.
the number of specific students on each one of those, 401 specifically.
Absolutely. I can provide that to
Thank
Dr.
you.
Stauffer so that it can be shared, most definitely.
Thank you.
Actually have that in the orange folder. I just don't have it on this slide, so I can get that together.
And then if that could be disaggregated also?
In what manner? By
Ethnicity.
specific grade level, ethnicity?
Yes, just like you did previously in the previous data.
That I don't have directly in the orange
Okay.
folder, but I can work
All
on
right,
that.
just a way to drill down deeper into see, again, the idea that it's not necessarily a vast amount of students who are actually involved in these activities, but a small number that we as a district can deal with.
Absolutely. And I give you full assurance, we are identifying those repeat offenders. I apologize if the term isn't one of adoration, but if you're doing the same thing over and over, you're repeating, and if it's a violation, you're an offender, so that's the term. Looking at middle school, grades 6 through 8, we had a 28% decrease, again, in these 3 specific 400 levels of referrals, and a 20% decrease in the total number of students. Again, looking at that number, 528 students had a total of 692 referrals for 401, 402, and 405. In high school, following the same pattern, the same occurrences of 401, 402, and 405, we had a 50% decrease in the total number of referrals in that area, and a 48% decrease in the number of distinct students. I also want to share with you some information, disaggregation in relation to special education. I know that comes up in these presentations and conversations, and I start with an explanation or a caveat that having an IEP does not equate to behavior, and having misbehavior does not equate to an IEP. However, we know there are some situations where a student with misbehavior does receive those identified services. Or there may be a student presenting with the behaviors who we learn is in need of or eligible for the services. So I don't ever want there to be a message that a student with an IEP is the reason for the data. A student with an IEP may have a referral, but a student with a referral may not have an IEP or 504. So I just say that as a kind of a caveat placeholder there. For special education, again, going along the 401, 402, 405, this is not up here, and I'll give you the reason. Some of the N numbers or the measurement number were of such that they were below the state threshold, meaning that it's more easily identifiable, to the individual student. The state does not publish that data once the number is below the N number, and some of this data was, so I did not put it on this forward-facing document. But I will tell you, for 401, 47% of the referrals were attributed or associated with a student with an identified special education need. For the 402, or the attack on student, 23%. And for the 405, or the fighting, 17%. Now, also, I'm going to sandwich this with another comment regarding special education. That identification can be anything from a student receiving a check-in hour a week or so for speech to a student who is in a fully self-contained classroom. It is not disaggregated by level of service. So I keep that in front of you as well.
And just to clarify, Mrs. Miles
Yes, sir.
and Mr. Smith, special education students with an IEP are about 10% of our overall population, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Miles, this isn't really for you, but I'm told that Swagat isn't able to switch over to your slideshow. Is there going to be a way for people to see these charts and stuff after we've posted this? It's not obviously going to be able to be live, but
I got it.
you got it. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to check because people are going to ask.
No, thank you.
And
That's
I'm so
fair.
glad, Ms. Hazel, that you said that that wasn't for me, because I would not have known the answer, so I appreciate that. So at this point, we can go to the second agenda topic that was on an earlier slide.
Kim, I have a question before you go.
Yes, please, Mr. Brown.
In middle schools, you got 3 grade levels, 6, 7, 8,
Yes, sir.
and in high schools, you got 4 grade levels. What are your total number of students in middle school compared to high school, and are there more students in the high school, which would contribute to the larger number of referrals from the high schools?
I have to want to go back and verify that number for you. There is a slight difference, obviously, with the 4th grade level. There's no magic number across each grade level, but there are higher numbers of students in the high schools than in the middle schools. So the overall total would be higher. So that may be a factor in it, certainly.
On average, we have about 1,000 kids per grade level. So the high schools have about 1,000 more students.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah.
And Mrs. Miles, one more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that in recent weeks, we've had a couple of very high-profile instances of behavior in our schools. And I will go back to your comment on the N size, that it's important that we not identify specifics that might zero in on a specific student. And for that reason, we cannot comment on the students or the instances that take place in our schools so that we're not identifying who those students are. But I think the population, the community needs to understand the school is dealing with those students. The
Absolutely.
school is using the code of conduct to apply what instances or consequences that they can. But those that want to make wild accusations that nothing is happening in our schools,
Very
to
true.
address the discipline, they need to understand that those instances are being addressed.
You are absolutely correct, Dr. Ennis. And keep in mind the data that I was showing you on this last table and sharing, those are 3 incident codes out of 30-some incident codes. There are many more incidents beyond that. And the majority of suspensions, unless it's that violent egregious, which automatically would, and our administrators know, may go directly to suspension. Many of the referrals have many other interventions and disciplinary actions that are being assigned in response to a student's behavior. We want to reteach appropriate behavior when it's inappropriate. However, violent egregious behavior we'll go back and reteach after the suspension is assigned. We'll have time for that.
Sort of to go along with what Bonnie said, I've had people ask me, why aren't we suspending the children that are attacking students? I want to make it very obvious that that is happening. We're not sending them right back to class. Like, the kids that are attacking teachers are not staying.
There is, you are correct, that the school is responding appropriately. And I will consider myself blessed to be able to work with administrative teams in all of our schools and programs and talk with many of them on a weekly basis on a variety of topics. Our administrators are nonstop, as are our school counselors and our social workers and student advisors in working on these behaviors. I am not aware of and do not believe there is any instance where there is not action. Now, some people may agree or disagree with the action, but the administrators are working through it appropriately. Pre-K through 2, there's a whole process that has to go in place before a student can be suspended. That is not a Wicomico County implementation decision. That is state, that is regulation, it is in Comar, and we follow it very closely. And I look to Dr. Jones, who is nodding continuously. It does not mean that a pre-K through 2nd grade student cannot be suspended. It does mean that there's a different and higher set of criteria on a suspension for those students. And if a behavior does not meet those criteria, there are still other actions being taken by an administrator in that school.
And I would
Full
just
assurance.
add also in slide 5 that Mrs. Miles shared, 5,381 suspension days have been assigned so far this year, so which is up by a little over 100 suspension days compared to the previous year, and compared to the previous year, our office referrals are down. So we're more suspension days have been assigned this year for a little bit less
So we're
number of
They're
referrals.
figuring that out.
Yes.
Let us hope.
Yes.
I think we have a lot of work to do to continue to reteach behaviors. We
Mhm.
work with children, not widgets, and we're prepared for that. But when the behavior is at a point that suspension is the appropriate address, then that's what we need to do. No administrator goes to school saying, wonder how many suspension days I can rake up today. That's not it. But they are prepared if that is the appropriate response, knowing and keeping this in mind. A suspended student is coming back. And we have to be prepared to address, support, and hold accountable that student moving forward. So, I love your questions and insights. Interventions and supports. I want to share this with you. And at some point, obviously Mrs. Moore-Springston, Mr. Smith, Dr. Jones, Mr. Brady, they are so integral in all that's happening. I'm being a speaker for our team, but certainly many, many people involved. The intervention programs that were new this year, the ELT, or Early Learning Transition, our pre-K through 1, our FACES for All Children's Educational Success, that is through the 5th grade, and then RTE, or Road to Excellence. I did want to share with ELT, we have 11 eligible schools. That means those schools have the pre-K through 1 grades. 9 of those schools utilize the services of the ELT team this year. 33 total students were supported, and of those, 8 were actually on site at the ELT. That means the remaining students of that balance were served in the school, in the classroom, with the ELT staff working directly with the teacher and/or the classroom assistant to find additional ways to reteach and to teach behaviors. So that's an amazing first year to be able to have that impact, and we continue to grow that program through grade 2 as well.
How long do the students usually take on a rotation through ELT?
I would defer to Dr. Jones. I don't want to misspeak, and it's varied by student. It's
Okay.
actually of when they're prepared to return,
Okay.
most specifically.
It could be up to 45 days, but we have no night. With our typical student going that far, it is our goal to bring them in, reduce the level of distraction from the large classroom that they've exited, and focus on them learning strategies to regulate their own behavior and identify opportunities for them to then, as they return, to use those strategies. So it has been
Start all over now.
It is our goal to keep them from having to use the entire 45 days that we will allot for that. Our goal is to get them back to their home school as quickly as possible, and send, as Ms. Miles reported to you, send a staff member from ELT back to the home school to assist with that transition. In fact, currently, that's where our staff from ELT is. They're back in the home schools with the most recent attendees of ELT, helping to transition them back in. And that's where they'll stay through the last day of school, helping them with all of the things that they learned while they were in ELT to be able to use those back in the large classroom where they were not successful prior.
Okay. Well, you and I have spoken about this before, but I want to make sure people understand, because I've had people ask me if they're staying there the entire school year, like that's their new home school, and I'm like, that's not how that works.
No, it is a program, not a school.
Yeah.
So, no, and each case is individualized. Every week, there is a very strategic meeting held with the homeschool in attendance and also with the parent in attendance to discuss the child's goals for returning and to discuss their successes during that week and things that we need the parent to join us with. And so each is very unique in returning to the homeschool depending upon the child's success.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. FACES is also elementary, and that goes through 5th grade. We had a total of 9 students served across all of the elementary schools this year. That is in-house, on campus, in the school, structured time outside of the larger classroom setting, again, for the purpose of reteaching behaviors and teaching appropriate social interactions so that there are not distractions, within the classroom. And transitioning to secondary with RTE, the Rise to Excellence, we had a total of, across grades 6 through 10, 125 students served in those middle and high schools. And that is a very time-specific transition, aligning with report card, marking periods, and trying to bring a structure in that secondary setting for these students, again, for the purpose of reteaching behaviors, teaching accountability to self and to others, and reducing those disruptions in the classroom so that all students can learn with a return of the students from Road to Excellence, pardon me, my apologies, Mr. Brady, I think I misspoke a while ago, Road to Excellence into their regular classroom schedule.
I want to clarify something else. I have a lot of people calling me about these intervention programs.
Okay.
Can you explain the in-house and how that works? Because I think people are thinking that these students are still sitting in the classroom once they're put in these programs.
There's actually a separate class setting that is staffed and supported by on-team staff members. And the students, I'll defer to Mr. Brady for more detail, but the students are actually working on their classwork. But in a smaller setting, there's more time for that one-on-one behavior-specific focus than there would be in a class of, say, 25, 28. So, Mr. Brady, whatever you'd like to add for Road to Excellence on the setting and the structure.
You shared it up?
Oh, okay. And we didn't even plan that. That's pretty good. That means he's taught me well to understand what Road to Excellence is.
And that works for FACES too, right? That's for
Absolutely,
both.
yes,
Okay.
yes, indeed. Sorry, I was keeping focused on secondary. You're absolutely right. Electronic hall pass. Dr. Ennis, you had asked about this before. Keep in mind, 101 is class cutting, 102 is tardiness. Overall, this is middle and high, a 26% decrease in class cutting, a 40% decrease in tardiness. I have to strongly believe that electronic hall pass has a huge part in this, as does our utilization of campus patrol. Boots on the ground, eyes out in the hallway, people moving around that building for the purpose of making sure students are not moving in places they shouldn't be moving, along with other safety measures.
I sat in a classroom not too long ago, and I was shocked at the amount of time students are interested in going to the bathroom. Like, that is a thing that I was not aware of, and it definitely seems to help the teacher be like, get in line. You know what I mean? So they don't have to keep addressing the same thing over again. So I was impressed with the hall pass.
I'm glad to love hearing the positive feedback. We're getting a lot of positive feedback from the schools. Another intervention and support specific this year, the code of conduct, the revisions that were put in place, the application of that. Anything that we do, we being the collective, whether it's code of conduct, policy, procedure, program, everything is as effective as it is implemented. So strong appreciation to our administrative teams with their understanding and utilization of the code of conduct the way it's intended, and with the board support and Dr. Stauffer's leadership in providing additional intervention and resource through the code of conduct this year. And I mentioned our campus patrol. We continue to seek strong team members in this area because their day is going around with the laptop or the Surface, whatever it is, I apologize, for the hall pass, the e-hall pass, so they can see who's supposed to be where, along with their radio for the safety measures, and they are constantly on the move in those schools to be making sure that we have a safe environment and that students are in class doing what we want them to do, which is learn. So we'll continue to look at ways to increase that campus security team with more information forthcoming. And Mr. Malone taught me well. School year, it's not an exact quote, but I'm kind of going with it.
Oh, no.
School year 23-24 moving into school year 24-25. You can look at this as, I'll give you an example, something we all share in common. We all stepped out of our homes this morning, right? Whether you stepped through a garage door, front door, side door, back door. So you closed the door, hopefully. If you didn't, you probably went back and double checked yourself. But at some point you closed the door. So you left something behind, whatever was in the house. That'll be there when you get back. But you also went into something new. You went into the rest of your day. You went to your car, you went down the driveway, you came here. So while one school year is coming to a close, we are in full swing preparing for what is ahead and what is in the new school year. More prolific way of putting it, rather than walking through the doors, that every sunset is a preview for a beautiful sunrise. We're coming to a sunset, though don't anybody get too excited. We still have in the double digits of days left in this school year as we move forward. But even as we're finding the wrap up for this school year, we have already been planning for next year. What is working that we continue? What are we building on to make even stronger and better? What new do we need to introduce to further support the amazing work being done in our schools by our administrators, our teachers, our support staff, by everybody who walks through those doors? That's the beautiful sunrise to come, and I look forward to being able to share with you moving forward what those plans are, what we have identified as working well and that we're building on, and what we're bringing in as an additional resource, and where we're building and recouping, and all of those great things that will make 23-24 be known as a really awesome year, and 24-25 being known as the year that can be even more awesome. So I appreciate the time that you've afforded me throughout this year to share this information with you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mrs. Miles? Got them in along the way. Thank you very much. So we'll go to 6.2, which is the FY 2025 Educational Facilities Master Plan. And that's Mrs. Ashby and Mrs. Campbell.
It's really Mrs. Campbell.
Okay, it's really Mrs. Campbell.
Clicker for the PowerPoint.
Oh, sorry, just pass it.
All right, good morning, Dr. Stauffer, Chair Malone, Vice Chair Brown, and the board. We appreciate your time today as we review the key elements of the draft FY25 Educational Facilities Master Plan, or EFMP.
Is her mic on?
That's what I'm checking. Yes.
Thanks.
All right. The Wicomico County Public Schools Capital Improvement Program consists of two integral components, the Educational Facilities Master Plan and the upcoming Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP. The FMP studies the issues reflecting our facilities in detail and is the building block of the program. Data is gathered, analyzed, and then used to make data-driven decisions about the needs of our facilities. The Wicomico County Public Schools Capital Improvement Program consists, mine didn't change. Okay, there we go. Overview. The document begins with an overview section on page 9 as indicated here, so you can follow along with the provided draft PDF document. This section provides the COMAR reference and guiding principles for the overall document. The FMP contains 6 main categories which cover the 8 topics outlined in COMAR. It's 14.39.02.02 if anybody wants to go look up COMAR. Administered by the Interagency Commission on School Construction, or who we like to call the IAC. The EFMP process takes place over the course of the entire fiscal year and continually evolves as information is gathered and becomes available. The development of Wicomico County Public Schools EFMP involves several contributors ranging from community organizations, local employers, surrounding local municipalities, various Wicomico County Public School staff, as well as county departments and representatives. All come together with data to guide us in improving our facilities with fundamental purpose of increasing student achievement. These are the 2 main questions regarding the adequacy of public schools, which represent the overall guiding concepts WCPS aims to address in our commitment to developing and maintaining a long-range comprehensive plan. The EFMP has 6 main categories as discussed. They're outlined in sections 2 through 7, which are seen here. We will highlight fundamental updates in each of these sections throughout this presentation. The first section we'll review is educational goals. This is the vision to educate each student to his or her full potential with the mission to provide all students an educational foundation and a set of skills which will enable them to become responsible and productive citizens in our society. Wicomico County Public Schools has a diverse student population, which is reflective of the diversity of the county in which it serves. We anticipate our student population to continue to diversify. The rate of citizenship is decreasing, while the foreign-born population is increasing across the county, with indication of high levels of diversity within the city of Salisbury specifically. Here are a few pieces of data based on WCPS total student population indicating that diversity and need. You guys have seen some of these statistics before. 13% of our students are multilingual learners, or ML. 82% are eligible for a free and reduced meal farm program, and all WCPS students are part of the Community Eligibility Provision, CEP, which means they get free food. 11% are special education, and then 34% have some type of chronic health condition such as ADHD, diabetes, asthma, etc. One guiding document that was added this year to the EFMP was Dr. Stauffer's State of the Schools presentation to give a good overview. The next section is applicable policies. It identifies all the established BOE policies impacting facilities planning specifically. New this year was the school attendance areas and redistricting policy, which was approved by the board in October of 2023 and can be found on pages 71 through 74 of the FMP. As indicated in the policy, state-rated capacity, as it relates to the optimal usage of school system facilities, will be reviewed in further detail in this presentation as we get into the enrollment and capacity section. Community analysis. This is critically important to integrate school planning and community planning. Schools are by nature a community-centered place, playing an important part in the overall community development. It is imperative that our public schools be an integral part of the planning efforts by both the county and local municipalities. Through the EFMP process, valuable information is provided to assist in planning for the future, including documented subdivision activity, census, demographic indicators, public utility plans, and designated growth areas. Residential development patterns are a primary indicator of community growth. The majority of the data presented in this section represents the development activity historically tracked and provided by the Wicomico County Planning and Zoning Department. As the largest municipality within Wicomico County, WCPS has worked cooperatively also with the City of Salisbury Infrastructure and Development Department to gain a better understanding of development activity within the city and is now routinely involved in the review process. A report of this residential development activity is included on page 121. WCPS has also proactively reached out to the other smaller local municipalities, but they do not track subdivision activity in a quantifiable manner to analyze. We have, however, included a report of what we gathered on page 123. Currently, there is not a mechanism in place requiring local municipalities to report their subdivision activity. Across Wicomico County, you'll see that the past 20 years indicate an interesting relationship between the number of approved building permits and lots. There was some trend shifts across the years. You'll see that in 2023 legislative session, there was a Senate Bill 246, which was passed allowing the creation of a sanitary district and commission in Wicomico County. Access to water and sewer in the county could have future impacts to single-family residential homes. WCPS continues to coordinate and communicate with our local municipalities regarding school planning efforts. So now we're going to dig into the City of Salisbury a little bit more specifically. While WCPS serves the entire Wicomico County student population, many students reside within the City of Salisbury. This map shows all of the red school buildings or schools that reside within the city, and black ones are just outside of the city. So more than half of our school facilities are located within city limits or just outside. Subdivision activity and building permit data for new residential construction is shared by the City of Salisbury Infrastructure and Development Department. As noted previously, there's a report in the new EFMP on page 121. In 2021, the Here is Home was a major economic initiative that was launched to solve the shortage of available housing in Salisbury. This initiative resulted in significant development activity within the City of Salisbury, including 1,834 known residential units currently in review and under construction tracked by the department, although the timeline and future occupancy is unknown. This data is one of the metrics used to better understand the correlation of new growth and development to enrollments existing and projected. Unfortunately, as you all know, since the city and county do not have an adequate public facilities ordinance or APFO, WCPS has no control over the future impacts of any development approved for construction besides reacting to the impact that occurs. So the reaction is normally to provide necessary portable space, to address overcrowding as students show up upon enrollment, or by adjusting student attendance boundaries and adding portables. So,
Kayla, on that real briefly, what do you see in other counties across the state that may have something like this? What does that process look like?
So specifically Frederick County, they have a lot of growth across the county. So they have an APFO for their county, and I believe they have one for the city of Frederick as well.
All the municipalities.
Yeah, all the municipalities. So there's communication then, and then a lot of times with developers, there's dollars associated with that development to support all the community facilities that need to be built for those students, for water, sewer, public services such as fire, EMS, all those sorts of things. That just, it doesn't exist here.
They actually have like an interactive interface where they're tracking all of the housing development so that, you know, parents, stakeholders can see where they are in the process. Whereas we usually get the, what do they call it? The plat, a draft plat. Sometimes we don't even know the number of units. However, we always respond accordingly with what we are tracking for projected enrollments, but we don't really know what's going to get built until it hits the permit, and there's not really a mechanism in place right now.
Why don't we have that? What was the reason that they don't do that here?
I would imagine it will limit the amount of development they would be able to execute throughout the county and in the individual municipalities.
But I mean, the other counties that do get heads up, was that a legislative situation? I'm wondering who we need to call to fix that we don't get any information ahead of time.
It's up to the local jurisdiction.
County
It's
council.
up. It's
And
an
city
individual
council.
county.
City
It's a council
Okay.
municipality piece, and I mean, Kayla is the planning department, so with with the support of actually our internal accountant, they've been making phone calls. They're gathering the information so that we can try to do the best we can to get ahead on the reactionary piece and determine where portables need to go, or if the board needs to be considering a boundary line adjustment.
Although many of those schools are within the city limits, aren't all of them considered county properties?
No, if it's located, for example, like West Salisbury, we wound up annexing to get water and sewer. So they're actually within the city of Salisbury. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just something important for the board members to understand that in other districts across the state, when developments start to come up, there's a process right through their city government and their county government where the developer's required to do a number of things, maybe even pay some fees, and to develop that property. Those fees can go to support the infrastructure, to support any addition maybe to a school that's needed, whatever it may be, and certainly the information at the very least is much more known prior to the building actually, the development being completed.
And the city, we've never done that, and the city council has never given us that information like they do in other counties. I'm just wondering why they've never done that, because we have huge townhomes being built, and we don't know where we're gonna stick the students, and I'm just wondering why we don't.
So the city's done, I will say, a much better job within the last 3 or 4 years. At some point in time, planning was all done comprehensively. Now there's a planning and zoning for the city of Salisbury, and there's a planning and zoning for the county.
Okay.
They've had some turnover in that department. However, they have Kayla hooked up to whatever their review. They'll submit it. We'll advise what's going on related to our projected enrollments. What happens after that is beyond our control. But they are consistently touching base, and we're providing them with that information.
And how far in advance are we getting?
Again, you're getting it at that sketch plat, what they call it the sketch plat stage. But it doesn't have teeth. Like the information we provide doesn't have teeth in it. There's, they're using it, they're reviewing it. It's part of their review process. I believe at one point in time the county had an impact fee that I believe the prior administration ended up getting rid of. So they're not even collecting those impact fees anymore. And then because we would see municipality plans that say, oh, well, you can use the impact fee to apply it towards school. It was a very small percentage, and they were taking it to pay off debt service on bonds. I just want you all to understand we didn't receive that impact fee directly. It was county offsetting, bond related type costs. So it's not something we could project as a revenue source by any means.
But I don't think there's ever been any builder turned down for apartments or duplexes because of school space. Do you know of any? It's been turned down?
No, because
it's just
you would need that APFO. That would be that
Yeah.
legal mechanism by which municipalities or the county would be assessing whether or not they have adequate public facility ordinance. That's why you see the county, the building permit things are down because they don't have water and sewer in a lot of locations. And developments that have occurred are usually annexing to a municipality to access water and sewer, and therefore that's where you're seeing where a lot of the building is occurring.
But I think that's an important question, because I hear that sometimes from the council members, well, just tell us you can't. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. We're always well after the fact. So for us to say we object to this development because we don't have capacity at this school, it's the opposite. It's always we're made aware of after the fact.
Well,
And
how are
many
they making the decision that we have room?
I don't think they're.
I don't think
I
it's
don't think they're
considered.
considering
Yeah,
us.
they don't
That
consider
they're
it,
just
yeah.
no.
Okay,
That's not,
Yeah.
not at all.
that's a problem.
It is.
Yes.
When a plat is received, I provide them with our current capacity data for the students that, the schools that they would attend within that certain area, so their elementary school, middle school, and high school, and I can note we're currently over capacity, and I would anticipate this to continue, but I don't know what they do with
So
that
just
data.
telling them we're over capacity makes
No
basically no
difference.
difference. So telling us ahead of time isn't really gonna help much because we don't have space. Okay.
Any additional questions?
Thank you for the time.
Okay, it's imperative that the EFMP provide information necessary to make objective data-driven decisions. The culmination of this data is our facilities can be found in this section, it's the facility inventory section. Various key data indicators are analyzed, sorted, weighted, and compiled to better prioritize capital spending. Definitions of these data indicators can be found on page 129. New this year, the state or the IAC requested an inventory of regional programs such as CTE, Magnet, and Alternative Learning. A chart with this information that has been gathered to date was included on page 209 of this section. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with this data yet, as a lot of those programs exist within our current square footage of buildings, but that is something they've requested. This is one of our scorecards and facility needs within this section. We have a third-party facility condition assessments that are conducted. We have all 24 of our schools currently in our conditions database. The database calculates the facility condition index, or FCI, that objectively measures the current condition of the facility. This rating, combined with a utilization, is used to prioritize projects, as we'll see on the next slide on our facility needs charts. All right. So all facilities data is compiled into these two spreadsheets. You guys may be familiar with seeing these in the past. In consultation with senior leadership, there have been minor revisions to these facility needs indexes to better align priorities with the FCI of our aging schools. The state also has an FCI and is working to combine the educational sufficiency standards to be used in future funding decisions. With senior leadership approval, the revised facility needs indexes were used for prioritizing FY25 capital spending and have been incorporated into the FY25 Educational Facilities Net Master Plan. So the facility needs for major capital improvement, which is the green one on the left-hand side, is comprised of two weighted categories, FCI and utilization. FCI is weighted the highest, and then utilization is added to the weight chart in order to make sure that the schools with a higher number of students affected by overcrowding are weighted higher or worse. The facility needs index for systemic, which is the orange one on the right-hand side, is just the FCI score now. It measures the condition of key systemic components of each school. You'll see that the major capital improvement list correlates directly with the systemic list, with many of the same projects identified as top priorities. The facilities condition index can be used to rank school facilities strictly on their condition without taking into account other factors such as utilization and enrollments. There are also projects that may not be identified by either the enrollment or facility needs analysis, but shall be considered important during the prioritization of capital funding. Some of those include pre-K enrollments, blueprints, the early learning transitions program, alternative education program, choices, alternative pathways, and our roof asset management plan.
Kayla, just one quick question, and I wanted to get it to you on the last slide. The in the orange chart, the 3 items in red, is that the last of the ESSER money?
Yes, it is.
So-
Those are ESSER projects that are still
So
wrapping
after
up.
those 3 are done, we have no more ESSER funds available to us, right?
Correct.
Okay.
The next section is enrollment and capacity. Not only is facility data a driver in planning, but enrollment and capacity are also closely monitored and projected to ensure adequate learning environments for all WCPS students. This diagram shows a system-wide enrollments over the past 7 years and projects them out for the next 10 years. The higher level view clearly shows the drop in enrollments experienced due to COVID, but indicates the gradual increase we are seeing in enrollments as we've almost returned to our pre-COVID level in 2023. While this view is important, it does not allow us to see the individual school groupings and how they will be affected and portable usage at school facilities. So this does not include any portables. With a closer look at this data, we can see a yellow highlighted circle indicating an enrollment bubble that is making its way through the entire system. The increased enrollment bubble started in the elementary schools in 2012. Although this group has exited the elementary school, enrollments for elementary schools are projected to continue to increase, suggesting another potential bubble, shown in purple, may hit our elementary schools in the coming years. The Maryland Department of Planning is still using actual births from calendar year 2021 as opposed to 2022 to estimate school year 23 and projected for school year 24-25. But they do say that the 2022 preliminary birth data still shows lower birth rates, showing that the pandemic and leading to lower school enrollment projections in future years. We're going to continue to monitor this as the data becomes available in coming years. The yellow enrollment bubble is exiting the middle schools, and the graph shows the total enrollments dropping farther below available capacity.
Where does it account for all of the extras we're getting because of immigration? It just seems to, boom, come in whenever. So that's not accounted for anywhere in our projected growth, is it?
We document the students as they show up and enroll in our schools.
As they show up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no way to
can't
predict.
So
I mean,
it's
it is
not planned
system-wide.
yet.
It's not
I
on
just
one grade
wondered.
level versus another, but there's no way to predict that.
Then I saw some faces, yes, the Maryland Department of Planning is a year behind that, which I think is probably not totally serving the state that well. However, we have to be tied to MDP's data as part of the master plan.
So the increased enrollment bubble has hit the high schools, and it's anticipated to increase enrollments in as much as 150 above the available capacity in 2024. This issue will continue to be analyzed further in the next slides. Again, keep in mind these charts do not include portable usage.
So what do we do when we're over capacity? We just buy more portables?
Yes,
Okay.
currently.
I'm just wondering if that's going to be a question.
Or in the case, a few years ago, there was a middle school boundary line adjustment.
Yeah.
And you can
Okay.
see it worked. The middle schools
are
enrollments are balanced.
Okay.
Portables come out of our general fund, right?
Correct.
And what do we know they cost? Does Jesse still know?
Too much money.
Yeah, I
That
was
was
gonna say,
Yeah.
they're not cheap.
No,
A lot.
All right. So I had mentioned these charts earlier when we talked about the new policy that you guys had approved in October. These charts specifically look at individual school enrollments and the capacity currently, as well as 5 years out, to identify concerns. So see all the yellow highlights? Those are concerns.
It's more than half.
That's a lot. So each are also identified as either a temporary condition or a long-term problem based on analysis of projected enrollments while accounting for the capacity added by portables. There are concerns at the elementary level as enrollments continue to grow to accommodate blueprint, pre-K initiatives, and they are anticipated to be long-term. We are going to continue to accept more pre-K students. The next section of the AFMP will focus on solutions for these schools. All right, so the facility needs. All the data is gathered, analyzed, and used to make data-driven decisions that culminate in this facility needs section. The data is compiled, provided through the previous sections, it's all analyzed, it helps to guide the direction of future work with regard to our school facilities, and it culminates in this specific section. So now we're gonna, oh, go ahead.
Just go back just for a second, just so that visual on the right is just not, it's not fluff. There's a database with all of your capital projects in it. That's just a snippet of it. So remember, your capital plan's over a 5-year plus 1 window. So Kayla's juggling hundreds of projects within the capital plan, adjusting each year depending on what the data is, and then adding to it when systemics pop up in the next five-year window.
So now we'll dig a little bit deeper into that big yellow highlighted chart. So the facility needs section is broken down into 2 subsections. The first section is projected enrollments. This subsection deals with the overcrowding issues that are identified within the enrollment and capacity section of the FMP. Solutions are identified for the schools of concern, while the planning effort informs instruction of areas needing continued evaluation. This slide provides solutions for the elementary schools' concerns. So you'll note that we will continue to review Beaver Run. Delmar is based on the bi-state agreements. Prince Street, we are having 2 single classroom portables moved there in 2024, and West Salisbury, we are anticipating a 4 classroom portable in 2024 as well.
Wow, new school.
How many students, I know that there's different size portables, how many students hold, like how many can you put in a portable? Is that like 2 classrooms? 2 extra, like how much?
So a single portable is 1 classroom, which
Okay.
we would, depending on classroom size, I'd say 20 to 25. It's
Okay.
a lower grade, it's less. So a 4 classroom would include 4 classes, 25.
Okay.
So I'd roughly say 100, but again, it depends on.
That's planning math. That's
Yeah,
not,
that's
not
us.
class size math.
I know, I've been in like small portables before where it's like 1 class, and then I've been in ones where they've sectioned them off into different, you know, I think Prince Street usually has, is it 2? I'm trying to remember, when you walk in, there's usually 2. So some of them are bigger than others.
Yeah, it just depends on the modular,
Yeah.
what their need is, and sometimes if they need 4 additional classrooms, it could be, 2 modulars with 2 classrooms each, 1 modular with 4 classrooms, or 4 single modulars.
It seems like we ought to just leave them in place because things aren't going to get any better from the state, and we'd save money moving them around, like West Elementary. If those portables had been left there, then we wouldn't be buying 4 more.
So when's the last time that the state rated capacity was risen? When was the last time it was elevated?
So state rated capacities are recalculated when you have like a capacity change. So if we've added an addition or we've opened a new building. So Beaver Runs was calculated at the time it had opened.
Okay.
Just stating the obvious in regards to the portables, obviously that doesn't help with the cafeteria space,
No.
the gym space,
No.
the hallway space. So it's very much, and kudos to the facilities team for making it, helping us make it work. They're Band-Aids.
Yeah.
And that's why state rated capacity is based off of just the building, not off of the number of portables.
Okay.
So they're looking at those other areas too.
And the state rated capacity is just a calculation. It's a spreadsheet, and you plug in how many classes, and they have a blanket what they think is an adequate classroom size.
Which is why I was wondering when the last time they rose.
They haven't.
No, they haven't in a long time.
And there are indications that they want to change that, but they haven't done it yet. Honestly, the IAC is like, they're staffing up. They have their own planners on staff now. Instead of partnering with the other divisions within the state of Maryland, they're staffing themselves kind of internally. So the spreadsheet that Kayla was referring to about regional programs, somehow that's going to be calculated. They're very data driven. It's somehow going to be analyzed and calculated, we're guessing, in the gross area baseline at some point in time.
So now we'll address the secondary enrollment needs. This slide provides solutions for the secondary level. High school capacity does remain a concern due to the enrollment bubble that's exiting middle schools and entering high schools. We'll keep an eye on that. Wicomico Middle, we'll keep an eye on that one. Mardella Middle School High School, we anticipate the addition renovation project that's currently underway will increase the state rated capacity. We won't actually submit to the state for an updated state rated capacity until we occupy the building and analyze how all the spaces are being utilized by administration. And then that calculation will be done. We'll submit it to the state and they'll review, approve, and provide our new state rated capacity. Y High, we did add a single classroom portable in 2023, and there are 2 additional single classroom portables that are moved there in 2024. They're already there. The second section of the facility needs is capital expenditures. This subsection uses data-driven decisions to making a breakdown of the projected capital project needs identified through the EFMP and identifies the top priorities over the next 5 years. The projected list within this facility needs section are indicative of what capital projects will be undertaken during the coming fiscal year and the subsequent 5 to 8 projected years. So, this next slide. The projects are broken down into 4 subcategories: systemic, which are 1 to 2 systemics; limited renovations, which are a minimum 5 combined systemics; major capital improvements, which are major renovations, replacement schools, and additions; and then other initiatives. It should be noted that the major capital improvements are as identified by the state and not based on project costs. So the state has definitions for each of these categories. As noted previously, the projects listed within the facility needs section can potentially be seen as capital projects that will be undertaken during the coming fiscal year and subsequent 5 to 8 projected years, depending on funding available. These 10 to 15 chosen projects are most critical. However, there are only a small sample of, like Liesl mentioned, 85 plus projects that we have in our overall capital plan, trying to determine which ones are the highest need.
What's the deal with the initiatives at the bottom? Is that we're trying to figure out what we need for those programs? It just says study. What is that?
So those are just areas I know that, particularly with staff, we've been planning around specifically for school climate, and I know that's also been something that the board's been very supportive of. We really want to take a look at, already we're expanding the early learning transition program to 2nd grade for this coming fall, so that's happening now. And then we really also want to take a look at our secondary alternative education program. That's something that I've just putting out there as a priority that we feel like needs attention. It's been the same structure for a long time, and we feel like there's an opportunity there to really improve what we're doing in that area.
So you all know the actual funding amounts and final timing will be worked out as we get into the state and county CIP process. Again, it's important to note that a very small fraction of the identified projects make the final list due to funding, staffing, etc. Typically more funding is requested than is available. We request way more than we ever get. So last slide, I ask that you provide any final comments on the EFMP document by June 4th so they can be incorporated into the final document. It'll be presented to you guys for approval at the June 11th meeting. After the approval, the document gets submitted to the state, and more specifically to the Interagency Commission on School Construction, IAC, to meet their July 1st deadline. So.
Do we get the email to us?
What's that?
This whole thing before it goes through?
It's in board docs, right?
It's in board docs.
It's all
okay.
available in board docs, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Any questions?
This is why I have to sit at this table. Mr. Palmer.
Well, you've addressed the needs of the school. What about the needs of your department? How are you fixed now and for the future in order for you to continue doing this and improving this?
Specific to planning, construction, or facility services as a whole?
As a what?
I said specific to planning and construction? Yeah. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Our staff?
Your staff.
Okay, well, you have a planning department of 1. She does a bang-up job. We have not been fully staffed in our construction division for I don't know how long now.
Several years.
It's kind of a constant up and down.
It's kind of vague.
It's vague because it's a very tough question to answer in a public forum. There's lots of different scenarios. I mean, we have trouble competing with the private sector for a variety of reasons. We also have trouble competing with other LEAs due to differences in retirement programs. So we will try to utilize contracted services when we believe that is an option. I think you guys have heard it before. We have done design build projects and kind of turned the whole soup to nuts situation over to a construction partner. We'll slice and dice it however we can to keep the stuff moving forward. But I think I mentioned it in the capital improvement program. It's really been a challenge. Everybody's done a really great job in trying to keep up. ESSER was, I know, a challenge probably with all the schools that we've been working at for several years. We've done some good work there.
Yeah, great use of funds.
But yeah, we're experiencing the same staffing shortages I think all the departments are throughout our organization as well as outside. It's sometimes a regional thing too.
Okay. Didn't put quite the exact number down on it, but I get the idea.
You looking for a second job?
No.
Any other questions for Kayla or Liesl? All right. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So 6.3 is our policy review section of the work session. And turn that to Dr. Rager, right?
Yes, good morning.
Oh, wait, yeah, we got to call Craig. Told him 9:30, then told him 9:45, 10:15, so he's on standby.
Hey there, Mr. Muser. It's Andrea.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi, are you about ready for us?
Sure.
Hey, Craig, it's Gene. How are you?
Morning, Gene.
So I'm about to turn it over to Dr. Rager. We're on the board policy review 6.3. So, Dr. Rager, you're up.
All right, good morning again. As you'll recall, the April 30th work session, the board gave consent to 11 policies to move forward. They will be on the June 11th board agenda. There were also 2 policies that was determined to pause on, get a little more research and work done. Those are before you today, in addition to a draft new policy. So we have the appointments, assignments, suspensions, dismissals of employees policy and the attendance policy coming back to us, and then a draft obscenity policy. And we'll start with that first one, appointments, assignments, suspensions, dismissals of employees policy, ADM HR PL 009. And this has got a lot of work over the past couple days between board members and Craig as well. And what you see that is not the latest one up on the board would be 1.6 is the latest version. There we are. That had gone back and forth primarily between Mr. Plotz and Craig, ensuring that we're meeting everything that's in the law, 6201, 6202 being the most prominent. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Muser and Mr. Plotz if they want to discuss what they've come up with here and if there's any opportunities or need to do any additional edits.
So I can walk you through some of the changes since the earlier versions, if you'd like. Line 1, I added the word promotion, since that's part of it's in the state code. Further down, so the version on the screen doesn't have red lines. I have my red line here. You can see in definitions, we've defined the various words that are in state law: appointment, certificated, licensed, promotion, transfer. Section 4, policy, updates the current policy to clarify what the superintendent's roles are versus the board. The next page, line 43. Number 4 is Mr. Easter's recommendation. And then you have at the bottom, interim promotions and acting promotions are new sections. You can walk through any questions in your heads.
So I'll just open up and then certainly for discussion purposes. So we've been kind of doing some of these things for a long period of time. I know the roles and responsibilities of the superintendent are in COMAR. This particular section of COMAR does not specify that a policy has to be in place, but certainly it guides, the work that we do, and what the role of the board is and what the role of the superintendent is. I guess my question is, what is the thought of needing a policy here? I know some of the school systems, quite a few don't have it. There are a few that do have it. I feel like we, follow what we need to follow. We did that today. We can certainly plan to continue to do that. So just open it up for discussion on that.
So I think we already had a basic policy that outlines state law. So the additions here would be defining what a promotion is. Make sure we're all on the same page what a promotion is. The definition of transfer. That comes from the State Board of Education opinions as well as Court of Appeals cases. So it's putting us all on the same page of what those definitions are. As the board changes, as the superintendents change, we all know based off policy.
COMAR is just the minimum requirement. That's why we have policy making decisions like they say this is what you must have, and if we feel like we want to add something additional in that by adding policy or changing policy, then that's up to us to do it. And I think this is what this is coming on.
Can you put up there what we have now? Is that in
The current one?
the current one? I've read it, but I want everybody to see it.
And some counties have very extensive policies that dictate how these processes work in policy.
So they basically
They
stick
go
a
even further.
procedure in there?
Yeah, they go
Okay.
even further than ours would.
That's it.
So my point was, I'm not sure why we need to do anything to what we already have. Because it does comply with COMAR. And this is what we're actually doing right now, right? Just like today, you brought the promotions in front of us.
Well, what's the harm of adding what David has? What is the problem with it being in there? Is there an issue with it?
I just don't always think we need to make these policies so long and expansive. The more words you have, the more places you can shoot holes in it, right?
Yeah, and I think Craig had maybe wanted to expand upon it. There are COMAR, there are laws that require us to have a policy.
Right.
And we do that, and there are laws that sort of stand alone. 6201 and 6202 do not require policy. Some of those policies, some of those laws that require policy are almost kind of silly sometimes because we have a policy that says we're going to follow a law and that meets that law. In this case, there is no requirement at the state level to have a district policy beyond what is found in 6201 and 6202.
But as David said, this puts everybody on the same page. Should we have, different board members, different superintendent, there's nothing in here that is contrary to COMAR or to what we've been doing. So I feel like this solidifies the language, and it also provides, a clear pathway for what we've been doing to continue, no matter who sits in these seats.
Craig, did you start to say something?
No, I think Dr. Rager is correct, but the board members are also correct. You can add clarifying language. The concern I've raised, and Mr. Plotz is present so he can articulate further, is the difference between Superintendent Stauffer or any future superintendent transferring somebody for, say, 60 days while you're trying to fill a vacancy, and the new language about interim or acting promotion.
So the state is clear that the board has to approve promotions and the superintendent can transfer. Transfer means to a lateral position or position of lower rank. So if you want to move a person up temporarily, that has to be board approved. That's a promotion. There's no, in the current policy or in state law, there's nothing that says temporary is allowed. What this policy would do would be to grant the superintendent new authority to do a temporary promotion for 90 days. If it wants to be longer, then it can come back to the board.
So, and Dr. Stauffer, maybe you can weigh in.
Mm-hmm.
What if there's a leave of absence, a 12-week medical leave of absence at a critical position, and you need to fill that temporarily? What would you do?
We would put someone in there as an acting, position for that point in time, or at times we've filled it other ways, but that's typically what we would do. If we needed to fill the position, we could do it one of several ways. We might have interviews and try to fill the position and bring that to the board, or we may have an acting position that we create at some, for a period of time.
And are you typically able to find somebody who's moving into a lateral position of equal rank, or do you frequently give somebody a short-term promotion?
If we were to do it as an acting, we would probably do it as a short-term promotion.
So I think the board just, if you're adding this language, you're probably going to have to meet, more frequently should the superintendent need somebody for, less than 90 days.
Craig, are you where we meet like 5 times a month?
Well, if you add this language,
Well, all true. You have work sessions, and if you think 2 times a month is sufficient, or I guess you could have an emergency meeting if you needed to, but I just wanted to highlight that consequence.
if you add this language, you don't have to have that meeting, because the board is giving the superintendent that authority to make that short-term promotion. Absent that authority, how can the superintendent legally make that short-term promotion?
I actually like clarification of policy, and we could spend probably 2 hours talking on it, so why don't we just move it to a consensus vote?
I'm confused on what the difference between Craig and David are saying. David's saying I guess I'm more confused on what Craig's saying.
Superintendent could do that in the short term.
Right. And the current policy, he could not?
Well, the current practice, based on what Dr. Stauffer said, is occasionally that does happen.
Very seldom.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any concerns currently with the current process that I and our staff are using in communicating with the board members. We try to do a good job of making sure that you have the information in front of you like we've done recently the last couple of months, and the changes and things like that. We try to keep you well informed and put the matter so I don't see it necessarily as anything going against the law or Comar. I'm like Vince when we learned from him very well a long time ago with negotiations. If there's if you feel like the language needs to be clarified, that's fine. Sometimes more language isn't always good language, but at the same time, that absent of that, I just wanted to make sure there weren't any concerns of the process that we've been using since I think all of you have been on the on the board. So
Well, I want to make sure that you understand, just because we change the policy doesn't mean you're doing something incorrectly.
Understood.
because I
But
don't
with
want
it
every time
being,
to
like I
come up
said, with us having our current practice and with it already being in Comar and law, just want to make sure that there's not some reason behind it for
Dr.
doing it,
Stauffer,
because
you would tell
we
you, I
were
promise.
already doing it and it's
Right.
already in law. So I just didn't think it was needed or didn't understand why it was needed. But
I just don't want us to get too deep in the
Yeah.
weeds. These are just clarifications, I get it. But I want him to be able to run the schools. I don't want to do that.
But it's mostly what
Nor do I.
definitions.
It's clarifying the roles.
And,
Yeah.
and that's okay if that's what the consensus is. Mr. Brown, you haven't weighed in. You've been in this, you worked in these positions
Yeah.
forever.
I'm one of those, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Well, there you go. That's where I was. Yeah. So we will ask you for a consensus. You want to move this to formal approval at the board meeting? It won't be the next one though, right?
Yeah.
It will make it by then?
in June.
Okay, in June? Sure. Mr. Palmer, are you okay with it?
Aye.
Ms. Hazel?
I'm fine with it.
Mr. Brown?
Yep.
Mr. Potts? Dr. Ennis?
Aye.
I'm nay, but it doesn't matter.
Of course it does.
No, I mean, in terms of moving along, it's got plenty to move along as a consensus. Okay?
Okay.
Next one?
The next policy for your review is the student attendance policy. This was, had some significant revisions from Mr. Plotz compared to the existing policy, so I'll allow.
I'd like to request to table that, to allow more time to integrate Mr. Muser's comments. Table that to the next policy meeting.
I'm good with that.
We do have a policy meeting scheduled for June 25th.
So we would still have time to make sure that all of our admin were familiar with the new policy and train on it before the school year, if we waited?
If we went to June 25th, we would be looking at the July 9th board meeting. So the
Okay.
Yes. Is that okay with the group? Okay, then we'll table that one till the
And
25th.
finally, then, there has been some discussion over the last several months about some kind of obscenity or obscene materials policy. So there is a draft that Mr. Plotz, I believe, in working in concert with other board members, has put together, and you have that on the screen.
So after all these past discussions, I looked for some common ground and came up with this proposed policy that basically says we will follow federal and state law on obscene materials. The definition of obscene materials is from state law.
So one question on this. See that the superintendent of schools is authorized to develop procedures to implement this policy. Is there any thoughts as to what that procedure?
I would think that that would stem probably from anything else that we have in place.
From what are our current existing procedures that we have in place regarding instructional materials and whatnot?
That would be my thought.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
If that's the case, I would suggest then perhaps adding under related documents some of those policies.
Some of those
Okay, yeah.
procedures and policies and things like that. That's a good idea.
Just in light of all of the comments that we get in regard to this, this is something for people to refer to that we follow, federal and Maryland law. And it gives the definition right there for them.
So how does this impact what we have in media centers, what we have in curriculum now? Do we have to go back and review all that and see if it meets the definition, or you're saying going forward?
I don't think that this would cause us to immediately make any changes.
Okay.
If there is a concern that something doesn't or does meet that definition of obscene, then we would have to address that. But that definition, I think it needs to be read carefully by all, understood carefully. The work taken as a whole, I think, is an important part of that. And again, you have as a whole in the showing up 2 more times in that definition.
Can you clarify what as a whole means exactly? I know there's no definition.
I would want Craig to weigh in, but to me,
Okay,
it would
let
be
Craig do it.
you
That's
wouldn't
good.
pull a sentence out that
Yeah.
you may have concern with being obscene, that or a paragraph, or perhaps even a chapter, wouldn't be enough to make an entire book
Yeah.
meet that definition. I would ask Craig to weigh in.
I'd love to know what Craig has to say.
I think you did a great job there, Brian. You had a book about a year and a half ago that people stood up and raised concerns about and spoke at a board meeting, and they read from one of the chapters. And I think if a case went to court involving that particular book, that the judge would have to hear from expert witnesses about taken as a whole. Even with that chapter that everybody was concerned about, is there still serious artistic, educational, literary, political, or scientific value to that overall book?
That's still questionable too, though.
But again, we have a
Well,
reconsideration policy already.
these are, the courts have said that this is a reasonable person standard, this final language about the work taken as a whole lacks value. And if you went to court, there would have to be, expert testimony about the
Can you scroll up a
reasonable
little bit?
person standard as to whether it has value.
I'm fine with the way we have this. I just out of curiosity, I'm very confused about as a whole, because is there a percentage, that the book has to be 80% obscene? Like, where are they getting the number? Does the whole entire book have to be like that in order for it to be not used in a school? I don't understand that.
It's not a percentage. They're just saying any objective review of the value of the artistic material, educational material, you need to consider all 268 pages of the text, not just 8 pages that are appealing to prurient interest.
Okay.
Yeah, I take that as you're not reading, this passage concerns me. And then
Yeah.
you make a decision about the book based on that passage versus that passage that's inclusive of the entire book that you have now read, and at the end of reading the entire book, you're like, okay, what are my thoughts on
Yeah.
this?
And then in turn, if that book doesn't qualify for that, you need to go through the process of either having the book pulled for your student, or the process that we put in place for having the book pulled from the library.
But that's not what this policy says. It says prohibits display, distribution, or use of obscene materials within school premises. It doesn't say if you think it's that way that you do the reconsideration process. So we are going to be challenged by the public saying, hey, I'm not going through that process because you say as a policy you prohibit it at the very beginning.
So you want it at the bottom?
I wouldn't do the policy at all because of that. We've already got a reconsideration
Well, this
policy.
is simply the Maryland state law.
Yeah, this isn't everything to do with that.
Not where it says
Well, I think
policy.
Mr. Malone
Go ahead.
raises a great point. If a citizen, a stakeholder, believed that the school system was violating this new policy, they could file an appeal to the superintendent. Superintendent might deny the appeal, and the appeal comes directly to the Board of Ed.
So they wouldn't have to do the reconsideration process that we have in place now for media books. I'm just
Right.
saying, I get where this is coming from, but I think we're muddying the waters of what we've already done. Just what I see.
But again, this is already a Maryland state law. So
You were kind of supposed to be doing
Yes.
this. It's just being put in the policy as a new number. Like if there's issues
And
with
David,
this,
this
that's
is exactly word for word.
Yes.
Yeah, David
There's
pulled it right
nothing,
out.
The
there's
definition is word for word.
word for word, he didn't add anything to this.
I don't know if it'd be worth it to stick something in there for what you're talking about, Mr. Malone.
Yeah, because where I'm at, if it's already Maryland state law and we already have a reconsideration process, why do we need to do this at all? That's my thinking, but maybe I'm a voice in the wild here.
Well, one thing, we got scattered out, I believe Mr. Briggs mentioned last meeting, over 2 or 3 different policies. One section's here, another section's here. What this does, it brings it all together under one policy, makes it easier for stakeholders to understand what's going on and how to proceed.
So the instructional materials policy and the media center policy both have a procedure. The media has it in the policy, but there's a process in both for reconsideration. This policy could just point to those 2 reconsiderations.
Well, that's
It's
what I'm saying.
instructional
It
materials,
can just be-
reconsider this way. If you meet media,
That's what I
reconsider
was,
this way.
that's what I
Okay.
was saying. It could be stuck at the
Yep,
bottom.
okay.
I think that would help with
That would help
Gene's
what I'm
talking
trying to
about.
say.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not
And I think
expressing it
that would
properly.
make it more clear,
Okay, yeah.
at least for the general reader.
So would that be just something that would be stuck under related documents?
Well, I
Policies.
think we've already stated we put them on there, but I think for what this most recent discussion would be something under the policy statement that request for reconsideration under this policy shall be accomplished through the existing media and instructional materials policies.
You good with that?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys
that's
good
fine.
with that?
I mean, yeah.
I can live with
Craig,
all
I
that.
hear
Craig, what?
on your end?
No, I think that's a good idea, Gene.
Okay,
So you'll be inserting a sentence that if somebody has a concern about library resources, or rather media resources or instructional materials, they are to follow the procedures outlined in those respective policies.
yeah, okay. I can live with that. Can everybody live with that?
Yeah.
Are you want to word it now, or we'll just leave it to you?
Yeah, I'm working on something.
Okay.
It'll be a brief sentence.
Okay.
Request for reconsideration of materials under this policy and something about referring to those existing policies and procedures.
All right,
If that's good with the group, I can,
very good.
and this will be on the website this afternoon.
Okay,
So we can move this on to the next stage right now, right?
yep.
There is consensus.
If there's consensus, yep, you guys are all nodding your heads. This one's simpler.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
That
I'll
means
have those
everybody
two.
agrees.
yes, sir.
I'll have these 2 policies added onto the agenda for the June 11th board meeting, and we'll add the student attendance policy to the work session agenda for June 25th. Thank you.
All right, so I think that concludes the board policy review, right? So that concludes the work session.